She walked into the boardroom with nothing but the truth and watched a 20-year empire crumble in minutes. She stood outside the glass doors, her reflection staring back at her. The woman looking back seemed different somehow. Older, maybe, or just tired. 15 years. That's how long it had taken her to get here. 15 years of sacrifice, late nights, and pushing through when everyone said she couldn't make it. She grew up in a small town where most people never left. Her parents worked at the local factory, and that was the expected path. Get a job, settle down, repeat. But she wanted something different. She wanted more. Not because she thought she was better than anyone, but because she felt this pull inside her, telling her there was something else out there waiting. So she left, packed everything she owned into 2 old suitcases and bought a bus ticket to the city. She was 22 years old and had $300 in her pocket. Looking back now, she couldn't believe how brave or maybe how foolish she'd been. But that's what it takes sometimes, isn't it? A little bit of crazy courage to change your life. The first few years were brutal. She worked as a nurse during the day, pulling double shifts whenever she could. The hospital was always short-staffed, and she was always willing to pick up extra hours. She needed the money. Every evening after her shift, she'd grab a quick meal, usually just a sandwich or instant noodles, and head straight to community college. Business classes. She wanted to understand how companies worked, how decisions were made at the top. Her apartment back then was tiny. She shared it with 3 other girls, all of them chasing their own dreams. The walls were paper thin and you could hear everything. Someone was always coming or going, but they looked out for each other. When she'd come home exhausted at midnight, there'd sometimes be leftovers waiting for her in the fridge with a little note. Those small kindnesses kept her going. There were nights when she'd sit on her bed surrounded by textbooks and assignment papers, wondering if she was wasting her time. Her body ached from standing all day at the hospital. Her eyes burned from reading, and the finish line seemed so far away. But she'd think about her parents, about the factory, about that small town, and she'd pick up her pen and keep going. 7 years of that grind. 7 years of balancing work and school, of choosing studying over sleep, of missing parties and weekends and all the fun things people in their 20s are supposed to do. But she finished, got her degree, and then, almost like magic, things started changing. She got hired at a mid-sized company as a junior manager. Nothing fancy, but it was a start. She was good at her job. Really good. She understood people, knew how to listen, and had this way of solving problems that others found complicated. She didn't just see numbers and reports. She saw the people behind them. Within 3 years, she was promoted to director. Within 5, she was running entire departments. Her mentor, an executive who'd been with the company for 20 years, took notice of her. He was one of those confident, powerful people who commanded attention when they walked into a room. He started bringing her into bigger meetings, introducing her to important clients, showing her how things really worked at the top. She was grateful. He was opening doors for her that would have stayed locked otherwise. People started talking about her as the future of the company. By 40, they said she'd be a vice president. Maybe even higher. She'd brought in major contracts, millions of dollars in new business. Her approach was different. She focused on building real relationships with clients, not just chasing quick deals. And it worked. Everything was going exactly according to plan, until it wasn't. Now, standing outside this boardroom, she felt the weight of the last 3 months pressing down on her shoulders. 3 months since her world had been turned upside down. 3 months since she'd been escorted out of this very building. Her access card deactivated. Her reputation destroyed in a single day. Through the glass, she could see them all sitting around the big conference table. The quarterly meeting was already happening. Her former mentor was standing at the front, gesturing at a presentation screen, talking with that same confidence he always had. The board members were listening, nodding, taking notes. Everything looked normal, like nothing had ever happened, but everything had happened. She took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking slightly, so she pressed them against her sides. She'd rehearsed what she was going to say 100 times. She'd practiced staying calm, keeping her voice steady. But now, actually being here, it felt different. Scarier. More real. The briefcase in her hand felt heavier than it should. Inside was everything. Months of work, of investigation, of piecing together the truth. Documents, records, evidence. The proof she needed to clear her name. The proof that would change everything. She smoothed down her blazer one more time. It was her armor today. Navy blue professional, the one she'd worn to every important meeting. She wanted to look composed, in control, even though her heart was racing so fast she could hear it in her ears. This was it. There was no turning back now. She reached for the door handle, and the cool metal against her palm felt like crossing a threshold. On the other side of this door was the moment she'd been working toward for 3 months. The moment where she'd finally get to tell her side of the story. The moment where the truth would come out. She pushed the door open. The sound of conversation stopped immediately. It was like someone had pressed a mute button on the entire room. Heads turned in perfect synchronization. 20 pairs of eyes landing on her all at once. She saw surprise flash across faces, confusion, and on some faces something that looked like fear. Her former mentor stopped mid-sentence. His mouth was still open, his hand frozen in the air, pointing at the screen behind him. For a man who was never at a loss for words, he looked completely speechless. She stepped inside, and her heels made soft clicking sounds against the polished floor. Each step felt deliberate, purposeful. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't sneaking. She was walking in like she had every right to be there, because she did. The walk to the empty chair at the far end of the table felt like it took forever. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They just watched her. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. When she reached the chair, she set her briefcase down on the table. The thud it made seemed to echo in the silence. She pulled out the chair and sat down slowly, taking her time. Then she looked up at her former mentor, who was still standing there, frozen. She kept her voice calm and steady, even though every nerve in her body was on fire. "Please," she said, meeting his eyes directly, "don't stop on my account." The silence stretched. Someone coughed. A pen dropped on the table, but nobody spoke. They were all waiting to see what would happen next. She reached for her briefcase and clicked it open. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Inside were folders organized and labeled. Months of sleepless nights were contained in those papers. Months of fighting to prove her innocence, to uncover the truth, to get back what had been taken from her. She was ready. Ready to show them everything. Ready to speak her truth. Ready to reclaim her life. 3 months ago, her life was completely different. She'd wake up every morning excited about work. She had a corner office with windows overlooking the city. Her calendar was packed with important meetings. People respected her opinion. When she walked through the office, employees would stop to ask her advice, to share ideas, to get her thoughts on projects. She was the rising star. That's what everyone called her. The board members would mention her name when talking about the future of the company. Her mentor would bring her into strategy sessions, introducing her as someone who'd be leading the company one day. Before 40, they said. She'd be a vice president before she turned 40. Maybe even higher than that. It felt good. Not because of the title or the recognition, but because she'd earned it. Every success came from hard work, from caring about people, from doing things the right way. She'd built real relationships with clients. She didn't just see them as money or contracts. She listened to their problems, understood their needs, and found solutions that actually helped them. That approach brought in millions for the company. Millions. Her department was the most successful one in the entire organization. Her mentor was proud of her. He'd tell her that all the time. He'd championed every one of her promotions, fought for her raises, made sure she got opportunities that others wouldn't have access to. She felt grateful to him. Without his support, she might still be stuck in a middle management position somewhere. Life was good. Really good. She'd finally made it. And then, on a random Tuesday morning, everything collapsed. She was in a client meeting when her phone started buzzing. Once, twice, 5 times, 10 times. She ignored it at first, but the buzzing wouldn't stop. During a break, she checked her messages. Dozens of them. From colleagues, from friends, from people she barely knew, all asking the same thing. Is it true? Did you really do this? What were you thinking? She had no idea what they were talking about. Then her assistant called. Her voice was shaking. You need to come back to the office right now. They're looking for you. Security is at your desk. The drive back was a blur. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had something happened? Was there an emergency? Did a deal fall through? Nothing made sense. When she walked into the building, the receptionist wouldn't meet her eyes. People in the hallway stopped talking when they saw her. Some stared. Others quickly looked away. The elevator ride to her floor felt like the longest minute of her life. 2 security guards were waiting outside her office. Behind them stood someone from Human Resources and a lawyer she'd seen around but never spoken to. Their faces were serious, cold even. "We need you to come with us," the HR person said. Not "good morning," not "how are you," just that one sentence delivered like she was already guilty of something. They took her to a conference room. Small, windowless, nothing like the bright boardrooms she was used to. They asked her to sit. Then they told her an email had been sent. Anonymous but detailed. Very detailed. It accused her mentor of serious wrongdoing. Financial crimes, manipulation, using his position to hurt people who questioned him. The accusations were devastating. And the email had been sent to everyone. The board. The compliance department. The media. Reporters were already calling. "Okay," she'd said, confused. "But what does this have to do with me?" That's when they told her. The email came from her account. Her company email address. Sent at 2:47 in the morning 3 days ago. She felt the room spin. "That's impossible. I didn't send any email. I didn't write that." "I don't know what you're talking about." But they didn't believe her. Or maybe they couldn't afford to believe her. The email was too detailed, too damaging. Someone had to take the fall for it. And since it came from her account that someone was her, they placed her on immediate leave. Effective immediately. They took her access card, her keys, her laptop. They walked her back to her office where she had to pack her personal items into a box while security watched. 15 years of work and she was being escorted out like a criminal. The worst part was seeing her mentor. He was standing in the hallway surrounded by other executives. When he saw her, his expression changed. It wasn't anger exactly. It was disappointment. Like she'd betrayed him. Like she'd thrown away everything he'd done for her. "I didn't do this," she said to him. Her voice cracked. "You have to believe me. I didn't send that email." He just shook his head slowly and walked away. That moment broke something inside her. The next few days were a nightmare. The story leaked to the media. Rising executive accused of sabotage read one headline. Jealous employee tries to destroy former mentor read another. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted comments. Former colleagues wanted to know if it was true. Her parents called, worried and confused. She stopped answering. Stopped looking at the news. Stopped going outside. She just sat in her apartment trying to understand how her life had fallen apart so quickly. Her mentor gave a statement to the board. She found out about it later, through a friend who still worked there. He'd painted a picture of her as someone who was unstable, jealous of his success, angry that she wasn't promoted fast enough. He said she'd been acting strange lately, making comments about how things weren't fair, about how she deserved more recognition. None of it was true. But it didn't matter. The board believed him. Why wouldn't they? He'd been with the company for 20 years. He'd built his reputation over decades. She was just someone he'd mentored, and now she looked like she'd turned against him. But here's the thing. She knew she hadn't sent that email, which meant someone else did. Someone had access to her account. Someone knew her password or found a way around it. Someone set her up deliberately. The question was why, and who. She spent the first week in shock, barely functioning. But then something shifted. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was just her refusal to let this be the end of her story. Whatever it was, she decided she wasn't going to accept this quietly. She started investigating, used her savings to hire a computer specialist. Someone who understood digital forensics and could trace where that email really came from. She pulled her phone records, her credit card statements, anything that could prove where she was and what she was doing when that email was sent. And slowly, piece by piece, she started finding answers. The truth was there, buried under layers of deception. But it was there. And she was going to dig it all up no matter how long it took. She interviewed former employees who'd left the company under strange circumstances. She talked to people who'd been too scared to speak up before. She followed money trails and looked at patterns that didn't make sense. She worked harder on this than she'd worked on anything in her entire career, because this wasn't just about her job anymore. This was about her name, her integrity, everything she'd built, and she wasn't going to let someone take that away from her without a fight. 3 months of living like this, 3 months of investigation, of dead ends and small breakthroughs, of spending money she didn't have. of fighting exhaustion and doubt. 3 months of being treated like she'd done something terrible when she was actually the victim. But now she had answers. Real answers. Evidence, proof. The kind of proof that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. That's why she was back in that boardroom. Not to beg for her job back, not to ask for forgiveness, but to show them all exactly what had really happened. To expose the truth, to clear her name, and to make sure that whoever did this to her would face the consequences they deserved. The silence in the room was deafening. She could hear someone's watch ticking. Someone else shifted in their chair and it creaked loudly. Her former mentor was still standing at the front, his confident posture now looking slightly rigid, uncomfortable. He was the first to speak. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding here." His voice was smooth, controlled, the same voice he used with difficult clients, calm but with an edge to it. "You were asked not to return until the investigation concluded. This is highly inappropriate. You're disrupting an important meeting." He said it like she was the problem, like she was some unstable person who couldn't follow simple instructions. A few board members nodded slightly, agreeing with him. She could see it in their faces. They thought she'd lost it, that the stress had gotten to her and now she was acting irrationally. But she didn't react, didn't get defensive, didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him calmly and opened her briefcase. The click of the latches echoed in the quiet room. "The investigation did conclude," she said, pulling out a thick folder. Her hands were steady now. All the nervousness from earlier was gone. She'd practiced this moment too many times to mess it up now. Just not the way you expected it to. She started sliding documents across the table. One to the person nearest her who passed it along. One to the board member on her right. One after another until everyone had a copy in front of them. The papers made a soft shuffling sound as they moved from hand to hand. "What you're looking at," she continued, "is a complete digital forensic analysis of the email that was sent from my account, the one I supposedly wrote." People started opening the folders, scanning the first pages. She could see their eyes moving over the text, trying to understand what they were reading. That email was sent at 2:47 in the morning on June 15th, a Tuesday. She paused, letting them absorb that. "I wasn't anywhere near my computer that night. I wasn't even in this city." Her former mentor crossed his arms. "That doesn't prove anything. You could have sent it remotely. Everyone knows how to access their email from anywhere." "You're right," she agreed. And she saw a flicker of satisfaction cross his face. "I could have. Except I wasn't just out of the city. I was in Seattle. At my sister's wedding." She pulled out another set of papers. "Page 3 shows my flight information. I left on June 14th at 6 in the morning. I didn't return until June 17th. Page 4 has my hotel reservation. I stayed at the Grand Plaza downtown. Page 5 is a statement from the hotel manager confirming that I checked in my laptop with their security safe. They have a record of it. Time stamped. My laptop never left that safe until I checked out 3 days later." The room had gone even quieter, if that was possible. People were flipping through the pages now, checking the details she mentioned. "There were 200 people at that wedding," she said. 200 witnesses who can confirm I was there the entire weekend. I was in the wedding party. I gave a speech at the reception. I'm in about 1,000 photos. Unless I can somehow be in 2 places at once, there's no way I sent that email." She watched her former mentor's face carefully. His jaw was tight. His eyes had gone cold, but he wasn't backing down yet. "So someone else sent it," he said, his voice harder now. "Maybe someone you knew. Maybe you gave them your password. This doesn't prove your innocence. It just proves you were smart enough to create an alibi." A few people looked uncertain. He was good at this, at planting doubt, at making his version sound reasonable. That's how he'd gotten away with things for so long. He knew how to talk, how to convince people, how to make them see things his way. But she'd expected this. She'd known he wouldn't just accept the evidence without a fight. "You're right again," she said, and pulled out another document. "Someone else did send it. And this is where it gets interesting." She placed a new paper on the table. It was a technical report, full of IP addresses and digital trails. Most people in the room probably didn't understand half of it, but they didn't need to. She'd explain it in simple terms. The email wasn't sent from my laptop. It was sent from a computer at a coffee shop. The Blue Cup Cafe, 3 blocks from this building. The forensic team traced the IP address. They also pulled the security footage from that coffee shop. She produced a photograph, A clear image, time-stamped, showing someone sitting at a table with a laptop. The person's face was visible in the shot. Very visible. This footage shows someone using a laptop at that exact time. 2:47 a.m. The coffee shop has 24-hour security cameras. They keep the footage for 6 months. Lucky for me, this all happened 3 months ago. She slid the photograph across the table. Board members leaned in to look at it. She watched their reactions. Surprise, confusion, and then slowly, recognition. "That's your executive assistant," one of the board members said, looking up at her former mentor. "That's the person who works directly for you." The man in the photograph was unmistakable. He'd been working for her mentor for 5 years. Everyone in the company knew him. He was always by his side, handling his schedule, managing his affairs, doing whatever needed to be done. Her former mentor's face had gone pale, but he recovered quickly. "This is ridiculous. So what if he was at a coffee shop? That doesn't mean anything. He could have been working late. This proves nothing." "You're right. By itself, it doesn't prove much," she admitted. "But here's the thing. Your assistant wasn't just at that coffee shop by coincidence. The forensic team examined the metadata from the email. They tracked every digital fingerprint, and they found something interesting. Draft versions of that email, saved in a cloud account. An account registered to a fake name, but paid for with a credit card that traces back to him." She let that sink in. Watched the information settle over the room like a heavy blanket. "But wait, there's more," she continued. "Because once the investigators started looking into his activities, they found other things. Bank transfers. Small ones at first, a few thousand here and there, then bigger ones, all going to accounts that shouldn't exist. Shell companies, fake businesses, the kind of accounts people use when they're trying to hide money." Her former mentor was standing very still now, too still, like he was trying to control every muscle in his body. "Your assistant has been cooperating with federal investigators for the past month," she said quietly. "In exchange for immunity, he's provided testimony about everything. Where the money went, who told him to do what, the whole operation." The room erupted in whispers. Board members were talking to each other in hushed voices. Someone asked for clarification. Someone else demanded to see more evidence. "This is all fabricated," her former mentor said loudly, trying to regain control. "This is exactly what I warned you about. She's desperate. She's making up elaborate stories to cover her own actions. You're really going to believe this conspiracy theory over someone who's given 20 years to this company." But his voice didn't have the same power anymore. The confidence was cracking. People were looking at him differently now, suspicious, questioning. "There's one more thing," she said. She pulled out her final document from the briefcase. 6 months ago, someone from accounting came to me with concerns. She'd noticed irregular financial transfers, money moving in ways that didn't make sense. She documented everything carefully. Being a good employee, she wanted to report it. She looked directly at her former mentor. I encouraged her to take it to compliance, to do the right thing. 2 weeks later, she was fired. Performance issues, they said. Except her performance reviews had always been excellent. She was employee of the quarter just 3 months before that. A woman at the far end of the table spoke up. She was older, had been with the company for years. "I remember her. She was excellent at her job. I questioned that termination at the time. When I started asking questions about why she was really fired," she continued, "that's when I became a target. That's when someone decided I needed to be removed too. But firing me would have looked suspicious. I was too visible, too successful. So they found another way. Frame me for something terrible. Destroy my reputation. Make it look like I was the problem." She closed her briefcase and placed her hands on top of it. "The federal investigators have all of this evidence and more. The SEC is involved. The FBI is involved. They've been building their case for 6 weeks. They have subpoenaed bank records, interviewed former employees, traced every financial transaction. They're presenting their findings tomorrow." The room was in chaos now, people talking over each other. Her former mentor trying to say something but being drowned out by questions. The board chairwoman, who'd been silent this whole time, stood up. "Quiet," she said firmly. The room gradually settled. She looked at the woman who'd just exposed everything. "Why did you bring this to us first? Why not just let the federal investigators handle it?" She took a breath. This was the moment she'd been building toward. "Because I wanted you to hear it from me. I wanted this board to understand that I didn't destroy anything. I tried to protect this company. I tried to do the right thing, and I was punished for it. You threw me away without a real investigation. You chose to believe someone based on his tenure rather than looking for the truth. She stood up, gathering her briefcase. This is my formal complaint. She had her hand on the door handle when the board chairwoman spoke again. Wait, please, just wait one moment. She paused but didn't turn around. Her heart was pounding. She'd said everything she came to say. The truth was out there now. What more could they want from her? Please sit back down, the chairwoman said. Her voice was different now, softer, almost pleading. We need to hear everything. All of it. She turned slowly. The room looked different somehow. Her former mentor was no longer standing confidently at the front. He'd moved to the side, and two board members had positioned themselves between him and the door. Not obviously blocking him, but close enough. He noticed it too. She could see the realization dawning on his face. She walked back to her chair and sat down. Her briefcase felt lighter now that most of its contents were spread across the table. The chairwoman looked at her former mentor. I think you should sit down too. It wasn't a suggestion. He hesitated, then slowly lowered himself into the nearest chair. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. Vulnerable even. You mentioned someone from accounting, one of the board members said. He was an older man, someone who'd been on the board longer than anyone else. Tell us more about that, she nodded. Her name was Rebecca. She'd worked in accounting for 12 years. She was meticulous, careful, the kind of person who noticed when numbers didn't add up. About 6 months ago, she started seeing transactions that didn't make sense. She pulled out a small notebook from her briefcase. She kept detailed notes, dates, amounts, account numbers. She came to me because she didn't know what to do. She was scared. These weren't small discrepancies. We're talking about significant amounts of money being moved around in unusual ways. Why did she come to you specifically? Someone asked. Because everyone knew I had a good relationship with senior management. She thought if I raised the concern, it would be taken seriously. She didn't want to get anyone in trouble. She just wanted to understand what was happening. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. She looked down at the notebook. I told her to document everything and take it to compliance. That's the proper channel for these things. I said I'd support her if she needed backup. She was nervous about it, worried she might be wrong, worried about what people would think. But she did it anyway. She filed a formal report with compliance. And then, the chairwoman prompted. 2 weeks later, she was called into HR. They told her she was being let go. Performance issues, they said. Not meeting expectations. She was devastated. She'd never had a single complaint about her work. Never. She'd been employee of the quarter multiple times. Had stellar reviews from her manager. The older board member shook his head. I do remember this. The termination seemed odd to me at the time. I asked about it, but I was told it was handled properly through HR. It was handled, she agreed, just not properly. After she was fired, her report to compliance disappeared. Just gone. When I asked about it, I was told there was no record of any report from her. Like it never existed. Her former mentor finally spoke up. His voice was tight, controlled. Employees get fired for performance issues all the time. This is a business. Not everyone makes the cut. You're connecting dots that don't connect. I thought the same thing at first, she said. Maybe it was just coincidence. Bad timing, so I let it go. But then I started noticing other things. She pulled out another document. 3 months before Rebecca was fired, someone else left the company. He worked in procurement. He'd raised questions about vendor contracts. Why were we paying certain amounts to certain companies? Why were some vendors being paid through unusual routing? He didn't file a formal complaint. He just asked his manager about it in an email. She slid the document across. He resigned 2 weeks later. Voluntarily, according to his exit paperwork. But I talked to him last month. Want to know what he told me? He was called into an office and given a choice. Resign quietly or be fired for cause. They had suddenly found all sorts of problems with his work. Errors that hadn't existed before. Missing documentation. Violations of company policy. That's slander, her former mentor said sharply. You can't prove any of that. He recorded the conversation, she said simply. The one where he was given the ultimatum. It's all on tape. He kept it as insurance in case they tried to deny him unemployment benefits. The federal investigators have a copy now. The room went silent again. This was a different kind of silence, though. This was people processing information, connecting pieces, seeing a pattern they'd missed before. "There's more," she continued. "Over the past 5 years, 7 employees have left the company under questionable circumstances. 7. All of them had one thing in common. They'd asked questions about finances, about contracts, about money going places it shouldn't go. Some were fired. Some resigned under pressure. One was transferred to a different department where she had no access to financial information anymore." She looked around the table. "I tracked them all down. Talked to each one. They were all scared to speak up before. Scared of retaliation, scared of ruining their careers, scared no one would believe them. But when federal investigators got involved, they started talking, and their stories all point to the same thing: a system designed to hide money, and anyone who got close to discovering it was removed." The board chairwoman looked at her former mentor. "Do you have anything to say about these allegations?" He stood up. "This is absurd. I've built this company's success over 20 years. I've brought in more revenue than any other executive. I've mentored dozens of employees, including her. And this is how I'm repaid? With conspiracy theories and accusations from disgruntled former employees?" His voice was rising now. "You're going to believe someone who was caught sending damaging emails? Someone who's clearly desperate to save her own reputation? She's manipulated all of you. Can't you see that?" But it didn't land the way it would have 3 months ago. People weren't nodding along. They were looking at him with skepticism, with doubt. One of the board members spoke up, a woman who'd been quiet until now. "I want to see the federal investigation files. All of them. They'll be presented tomorrow," she said. "But I can tell you what they found. Shell companies. Dozens of them. Set up over the past decade. Money from our company being funneled to these companies for services never rendered. Fake invoices for work never done. Vendors who don't actually exist. The money goes into these shells, then gets moved again, eventually ending up in offshore accounts." She pulled out a chart. The investigators traced it all. Every transaction, every transfer, every account. It's all connected. And it all flows through companies that are controlled by one person. She didn't need to say who. Everyone in the room could figure it out. Her former mentor's face had gone from pale to red. "You have no proof. This is all speculation, circumstantial. The FBI has bank records," she said calmly. "They have emails. They have testimony from your assistant, who helped set up many of these accounts. They have documentation going back years. This isn't speculation. This is evidence, the kind that holds up in court." Security appeared at the door. The board chairwoman must have called them in at some point. "I think we need to pause this meeting," she said. She looked at the security guards. "Please escort him to his office. He's not to leave the building or access any computers until we sort this out." "You can't do this," her former mentor said, but his voice had lost its power. He looked around the room, searching for allies, for someone who would stand up for him. But everyone avoided his eyes. The security guard stepped forward. "Sir, if you'll come with us." He stood there for a moment, frozen. Then something in him seemed to break. His shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him. Without another word, he walked toward the door, security on either side. As he passed her chair, he stopped. "I made you," he said quietly, just to her. "I gave you everything." She looked up at him. "No, you used me. There's a difference." He stared at her for a long moment, then walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The room stayed quiet. She could hear people breathing, shifting in their chairs. Someone cleared their throat. The board chairwoman looked exhausted. "We owe you an apology. A significant one. We failed you. We should have investigated properly from the start instead of making assumptions." "Yes," she said simply. "You should have. We'd like to discuss your resignation. We'd like you to reconsider." She shook her head. "I meant what I said. I can't work somewhere that didn't trust me, that didn't believe in me when it mattered most." "What if things changed?" another board member asked. "What if we implemented new protections? New procedures for handling complaints?" She stood up, gathering her briefcase. "Then maybe the next person won't have to go through what I went through. And that would be a good thing. But it won't change my decision." She walked to the door one final time. This time, no one tried to stop her. As her hand touched the handle, she turned back. "One more thing. Rebecca, the accountant who was fired, she deserves her job back. and an apology, and compensation for what was done to her. The same goes for the others who were pushed out for trying to do the right thing. The board chairwoman nodded slowly. We'll make it right. I hope so, she said. And then she left, walking out into the hallway, past her former mentors. The boardroom erupted into chaos after Sarah finished speaking. James was escorted out by security within the hour, his protests echoing down the hallway. Emergency board meetings were called. Lawyers swarmed the building. The media picked up the story by evening, and by morning, James Harrison's mugshot was on the front page of the business section. Sarah didn't stay to watch the fallout. She walked out of that building for what she thought would be the last time, her head held high despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. The vindication felt hollow. She'd been proven right, but she'd lost her career, her mentor, and 3 months of her life to stress and fear. 2 weeks later, Eleanor Chen called her personal cell phone. The board would like to meet with you, she said without preamble. We owe you more than an apology, Sarah. We failed you. The meeting was different this time. Smaller, more intimate. The board offered her reinstatement with back pay, a promotion to vice president, and a formal public apology. They'd also implemented new whistleblower protections and oversight procedures. Sarah listened carefully, then surprised them all by declining. I appreciate the offer, she said, but I've had time to think about what I really want. This experience taught me that I don't want to climb someone else's ladder anymore. Instead, she'd been consulting with several of James's former victims, other employees who'd been pushed out or silenced over the years. Together, they were starting a nonprofit focused on supporting corporate whistleblowers and reforming accountability practices in businesses. As she walked out of that boardroom for the final time, the room didn't go silent. Instead, Eleanor stood and began to clap. One by one, the other board members joined her. Sarah paused at the door, nodded once, and stepped into her new future. The room had gone silent when she arrived because they'd feared her. She left to applause because they'd learned to respect her, and for Sarah Mitchell, that made all the difference.